A few days later, everyone returned to the border town and landed in the castle's backyard. Nightingale was immediately surrounded by her sisters. Manhwa hurriedly asked Nightingale where she was injured. Lily pointed out that Manhwa had been waiting for days and wondered why it took so long to return. Lucia anxiously inquired if her wounds still hurt. Nightingale patted Lucia's head, assuring her that she was fine now. Wendy was quite upset, condemning Nightingale for her recklessness. How could Nightingale wander around the church by herself? It was far too dangerous. Scroll comforted, saying it's good that they returned safely. Leaf mentioned she had prepared a new batch of herbs that could help reduce swelling. Lily insisted on disinfecting Nightingale's wounds before using the herbs. Witnessing their genuine concern, Nightingale felt a warmth surge within her heart. There was no doubt that this was the place she would give anything for. Then she saw Roland. Lightning had already darted into his arms, clinging to him like a gecko. Maisie too flew over, landing on Roland's head and nuzzling his cheek. Nightingale had the same urge, but she reminded herself that she was no longer a child. Suppressing the impulse to hug him, she approached the prince. His smile was as familiar as ever. He suggested that Nightingale take a warm bath and rest up. He also mentioned he had left several packets of honey-glazed fish jerky in his office drawer for her. Later in the evening, Roland held a grand banquet in the castle. Everyone jovially discussed the recent battle. Nightingale mused that even though she didn't know what kind of lives the witches from the church led, she was sure about the camaraderie within the witch union. This place was the true holy mountain for witches. After the banquet, Roland returned to his office. As he walked in, rubbing his slightly dizzy head, he found Nightingale already seated cross-legged on the desk, waiting. Roland told her that she should be resting for a few more days, but Nightingale, munching on her fish jerky, assured him she was back in top form. Just as Roland settled into his seat, she hopped off the table, circled behind him, and placed her arms around Roland. To Nightingale, an extra day of rest meant one less day with Roland. Roland's face reddened slightly, but Nightingale confessed she had wanted to do the same in the castle garden earlier, only there had been too many people around then. It wasn't until there was a knock on the office door that Nightingale pulled away, fading into the mist. It turned out to be the Lord of Dragonfall Ridge. As Spear entered the office, she had already given deep thought to Roland's previous requests. Roland succinctly briefed her on the looming crisis of the kingdom, the origins of the church, and the threat of the demons. He also shared his subsequent plans. Hearing all this, Spear found it hard to believe. If it weren't for the testimonies of Tilly and Agatha, she wouldn't have accepted such tales. However, after that conversation, her attitude underwent a significant shift. When discussing Roland's future plans for the Western territories, she was agreeable but was curious about how to promote it across all territories. Roland firmly stated that he had to proceed in this manner. If not, Grey Castle would merely be scattered sands. Before the final enemies arrived, he needed to gather as much strength as possible. Spear slowly remarked this move would offend all the nobles by curtailing their rights, especially regarding hereditary positions. This will undoubtedly solidify Roland's reputation as a rebel king. Roland clarified he didn't intend to change their status. He merely wishes for them to adapt to the new system. They can still retain their territories, they'll only lose some of their privileges. Spear realized Roland was resolute in his decision. She thought that if she didn't accept, she might also be overthrown by Roland's army. Roland shook his head and sincerely added, what he is lacking most right now are administrators. Telling Spear that she won't lose her territory and that she can appear openly before the people as a witch without any threat from the church. Spear was silent for a moment, setting down her teacup. She says she has one condition. She wants everything to remain the same for a while after Roland helps her reclaim Dragonfall Ridge. Only when Timothy is dethroned can she fully support Roland. Roland understood her stance. It was neither an outright refusal nor full support, but it gave her room to maneuver. Her meaning was clear. Roland had to prove he had the capability to unify Grey Castle. Roland was undeterred. He had confidence that Timothy's reign would soon end. Hesitating, Spear inquired about joining the evening lessons. This took Roland by surprise as those were foundational lessons, seemingly of little use to a noble like Spear. However, Spear mentioned finding the calculation methods was intriguing and expressed her desire to learn. Roland wondered if she referring to the multiplication tables or algebraic equations. Roland couldn't help but chuckle. If Spear wishes to join the witch union, she naturally can. After lunch, Axe brought good news. Roland followed Axe to the basement where the priest was being held captive. The priest was unharmed, and his clothes were intact, but he appeared listless and kept muttering a phrase repeatedly. Upon seeing Roland, he yelled accusingly, claiming that Roland had unleashed demonic powers and the divine beings would punish them. Axe glared coldly at him, warning him not to utter nonsense unless he wanted to relive the punishment from the previous night. Frightened, the priest suddenly sat on the floor. Slowly, he introduced himself. When asked about the witch's identity, the priest said her name was Aurora, the pure one of Archbishop Tayfun. Roland glanced at Nightingale, who was hidden within the mist. Nightingale confirmed the priest wasn't lying. When pressed about the purpose of framing the Lord of Dragonfall Ridge, the priest admitted he was clueless. His only task was to monitor Aurora until they discovered that the Lord was a true witch, at which point they intended to capture her and bring her to the Holy City. Their plan involved passing through 3 cities, though the priest didn't know the reasoning behind choosing these particular cities. Roland thought to himself that these 3 cities were situated on the western borders. Could this operation be specifically targeting him? When the questioning was over, it was clear the priest didn't know much. Oddly, he neither pleaded for mercy nor did he condemn Roland and Axe. Eyes closed, the priest stated that his final judgment would come from the gods, not Roland. Axe suggested handing the priest to him for a night, assuring that his attitude would change. But Roland, believing the priest had shared all he knew, declared that the priest's judgment wouldn't come from the gods, but from the people's verdict. In the town square of the border town, a wooden platform had been built. However, this time, it wasn't for a show performance, but for the town's very first public trial. On the day of judgment, the area around the platform was packed with townsfolk. They waved their arms at Roland, their shouts rising and falling in waves. Pressed by the crowd, the priest was brought forth. Facing the throngs of people, his expression shifted. Roland wanted to unveil a heinous crime to the public. He had been pondering for 2 days on how to best expose the church's misdeeds without inciting panic. Roland couldn't talk about the divine war or matters related to the demons. If he wished to rouse public indignation, he had to speak about matters that concerned them directly. He revealed that the church had branded witches as evil minions of the demon, ugly and dangerous. Yet, he revealed, the pope and archbishops harbored these very witches. This fact, he proclaimed, was admitted by the priest himself. Turning to the priest, there was a prolonged silence before the priest confirmed the claim. The crowd erupted in a flurry of whispered discussions. Someone in the crowd asked if the priest truly hailed from the holy city. Roland presented evidence, including the priest's documents, robes, insignia, and official proclamations. He emphasized the church's hypocrisy in harboring witches. To amass more witches, they not only sheltered homeless women under the guise of charity but even colluded with street gangs to steal babies. The realization that kind-hearted girls like Manhwa could be taken by the church incensed the townsfolk. They waved their fists in anger at the priest. Parents held their children close, and young couples clung to each other. The crowd couldn't bear the thought of Manhwa or their own loved ones being harmed by the church. The priest, looking out at the incensed masses, trembled with fear. Roland then stepped forward, unfurling a long list of his crimes before the priest. He loudly asked, regarding his charges, what else does he have to say? The priest fell to his knees, admitting all accusations were true. The square exploded with chatter upon hearing his confession. Finally, in the snow-covered border town, the people made their choice. After reading the contract several times, Spear signed her name at the end. She never imagined that so many common people would support a noble. She had always believed that nobles neither needed nor cared for the understanding or support of the commoners. Yet, perhaps there was a power in it she hadn't realized before. Like Roland, she found him seemingly lost in thought. Spear assumed he might be regretting the trial from the day before. However, Roland asserted that he never regretted opposing the church, they were enemies he had to defeat. Still, he was somewhat pensive. Even though he had exposed the church's genuine sins, he felt uneasy. Perhaps, he mused, he wasn't yet a qualified politician. This was the first time Spear had heard the term politician. She wondered what it meant. But before she could ask, Roland changed the topic. He put away the contract, and when the conversation turned to Spear's abilities, she explained them in detail, expressing her eagerness to serve Roland. In the backyard, Roland introduced Anna and Rem to Spear. Rem's magical power was considered on the lower side within the Witches' Union, but its consumption was shockingly high. Roland hoped to use Spear's abilities to connect Anna and Rem's magical powers. Spear nodded and used her ability, which manifested as a sphere emitting a soft white glow, floating midair. Under her control, two thin lines extended from the sphere, resembling a line reaching out towards Anna and Rem. As the line merged into Anna's chest, suddenly, Spear gasped sharply. Spear could sense that what lay inside Anna wasn't a swirling magical core, but rather a solid metallic cube. It was so immense that she felt like an ant standing below it, having to reach her neck to see its top. Spear tried several times to connect with it, but was consistently repelled. After numerous attempts, the line finally managed to touch the cube. However, there was no response. Spear has never channeled such powerful magic before. It's too overwhelming. Anna wanted to give it a try as she began to pour her magic into it. A sudden change occurred within her. The magical energy from the cube rushed towards Spear. To Spear's surprise, it felt an immense weight. Yet, even as the orb filled with energy, Anna's metallic cube remained in its original form, as if the tremendous power was just a trivial portion of its capability. As all preparations were in place, Roland handed a cylindrical object to Rem. Holding it with both hands, Rem closed her eyes, and the magic within began to circulate wildly. Spear noticed that Anna's metallic cube shimmered faintly. The magic within her core kept getting drained only to fill up again instantly. Spear was having a trouble time keeping up. With the massive amount of magic surging within her, she knew that the receiving end. Rem should have felt much worse, but how was she able to continue channeling power for so long? Minutes later, she wasn't sure how she endured till the end. By the time Anna's magical power was nearly spent, Spear felt her legs wobbling, hardly able to stand. Opening her eyes, Rem excitedly held up the cylinder rushing towards Roland. Roland clapped in joy and carefully held the cylinder with wooden tongs, saying this was a magnet whose polarity keeps shifting. Spear looked puzzled, but Nightingale chuckled, telling her that these conversations were best left for Anna to join. Anna revealed a brand new electric motor nearby and Roland placed the cylinder inside. Rem grabbed a wooden lever attached to the machine and pulled it. The machine came to life instantly. Spear noticed the sparkle in Roland's eyes as if this crude iron instrument was a dazzling jewel. Watching this group, Spear was truly amazed. Whether it was the Witches' Union or Roland, they all seemed so different. The electric motor ran for 5 days, tirelessly working day and night, before finally stopping today. Roland leaned back in his office chair, letting out a long sigh of relief. He finally had a brand new power source. But the drawback was that each time, it would drain all of Anna, Spear, and Rem's magical energy completely. After some thought, Roland turned to Wendy, questioning if she could help tally up the daily magic usage of all the members of the Witches' Union. Then, they can systematically channel the surplus to Rem. This method would not only maximize the witch's power, but also serve as intensive training. It would significantly boost their magical growth, especially during the Awakening Day. Wendy smiled, saying that sounds like a great plan. She then remembered that today was Lucia's coming-of-age day. She asked if she should gather everyone to celebrate with her tonight. Roland paused, almost having forgotten about it. Wendy gently said she recorded each sister's important dates in a notebook so that she never missed anyone. Roland nodded in appreciation. Tonight, he will prepare a grand feast. And it won't be just the Witches' Union, Roland himself be there to celebrate with her too. After dinner, Lucia's room was packed with witches. Seeing their comforting and encouraging expressions, her eyes moistened. Holding back the tears, she took a deep breath. Agatha was also present, and despite her yawning and the evident dark circles under her eyes, she seemed determined. Roland gave her a concerned look, hoping she wasn't pushing herself too hard. Agatha murmured, "The divine war is looming." Roland confidently affirmed that this time, they will surely defeat the demons. After a pause, Agatha turned her head and whispered, "Even if Roland doesn't keep his promise, she won't be able to hold him accountable anyway." Wendy interrupted, suggesting that they avoid such heavy topics today. Turning to Lucia, Wendy asked if she had any wish she wanted to be granted. As everyone's attention shifted to her, Lucia hesitated. Ling, hugging her sister, innocently telling her sister to ask for 10 ice cream sandwiches. Lucia lightly tapped her younger sister on the forehead, playfully chiding her for always thinking about food. Lucia then asked Roland if she could save her wish for later. Roland smiled, assuring her that it was possible. Lucia expressed her gratitude. She thought to herself that living in this town was all she desired, and she only wished for Ling to live a happy life. Knowing her sister was not a witch, and would one day leave her side to start her own family, Lucia hoped her saved wish might come in handy should any unforeseen event occur. Suddenly, Lucia felt a tremor within her body. "It's beginning," Nightingale said gravely. Even though her sisters assured her not to worry, Lucia instinctively clutched her blanket tighter. Wendy tried to soothe her, advising her to relax. The others attempted to divert Lucia's attention by sharing lighthearted stories and jokes. Lucia wanted to laugh, but her expression felt rigid, and her body was increasingly uncomfortable. Soon, her eyelids felt heavy, and the voices of the witches around her grew fainter. As their figures blurred, Nightingale hushed everyone, sensing something was off with Lucia. Agatha swiftly acted, telling Spear to use her ability. Spear used her ability to connect Lucia with Anna, and send the magical line to Lucia. Lucia clearly felt this magic was not her own. It was like a conduit, latching onto her magical core. With no time to question its origin, she channeled the tumultuous energy within her into the conduit, immediately easing her pain. Like finding a lifeline, Lucia continued to pour her magic into it, alleviating the anguish in her body. Anna grabbed the divine seal imprint and pointed it toward the window, letting an immense amount of magic flow out, shattering the nearby wall. Lucia didn't know how much time had passed before her vision returned to normal. Seeing her younger sister Ling on the verge of tears, she gently tapped her on the head, assuring her that everything was fine now. She noticed the sudden drop in temperature and turned her head only to be stunned. The wall had a huge hole. Standing in front of it was Anna, her eyes filled with concern and the divine seal imprint in her hand emitting a faint glow. Nightingale's gaze turned sharp as she focused on Lucia. Lucia has evolved her ability. The next morning, Powerf rushed into Roland's office, wanting to know what happened the previous evening. Pouring a cup of tea for Powerf, Roland asked him to calm down first. Upon learning that the phenomenon was caused by a witch's powers, Powerf expressed his concerns. He mentioned that while the majority of the townsfolk had come to accept witches' abilities such as Nanawa's harmless healing powers, abilities capable of damaging castles and altering celestial phenomena were bound to instill fear. Roland, after sipping his tea, devised a plan to address the situation. He suggested to Powerf that a rumor be spread. The golden glow seen the previous night was Prince Roland capturing the heaven's thunder to bring light to his town. Powerf, rubbing his bald head, looked at Roland in surprise, wondering if his highness truly harnessed thunder. Roland shrugged, telling him lightning and thunder are omnipresent. He didn't elaborate further, hoping Powerf would simply spread the information as an intended rumor. To avoid any negative implications for future educational efforts, such information shouldn't deeply penetrate the public's beliefs. It merely needed to provide a temporary explanation for the time being. Soon after, Carl arrived with his plans to reconstruct the apartment, followed by others. Roland felt overwhelmed, realizing he would spend the entire day addressing the previous night's events. Carter gazed intently at Roland, asking if he was hurt. Axe looked Roland's way, wondering if the demons had launched their attack. Yet, what Kyle was most curious about was which had more power, the divine seal imprint or nitroglycerin. It wasn't until Roland had explained in detail that he managed to send them on their way. Leaning back in his chair, just as he was about to catch a quick nap, there was another knock on the door. The last visitor of the day was Tilly. With a smile, Tilly said she already knew about yesterday's events. She was simply curious as to why such an incident had occurred. After all, the witches of Slumbering Isle never faced such issues. Why then did Lucia suffer from magical backlash? And as for evolving abilities, she didn't find that odd. To her, every few days, someone in the border town would evolve. Roland poured her a cup of tea and, after a moment of contemplation, spoke. He rummaged through a drawer and presented Tilly with a report card, suggesting it might be the reason behind it all. Tilly took the report card with a puzzled expression and gave it a quick glance. She noticed Lucia's remarkable progress. Tilly never doubted Roland's theory, but she wondered, how does this relate to the magical backlash? Roland explained, based on his observations of Lily, Leaf, and Rem, when one's abilities evolve, it often increases one's magical level. Incremental understanding and sudden realizations don't boost magical power as much as a comprehensive understanding of the world. Rem is a prime example. Her evolution was driven by sudden insights, and her magical level is nowhere near Anna's or Soraya's. Tilly pondered for a moment, quickly grasping Roland's point. Lucia, having always been at a low magical level, was used to her magical level. This time, her coming of age coincided with her evolution, causing her magical power to multiply several times over, far exceeding what her body could handle. Roland nodded, that's the gist of it. As for magical power, Roland stated that during awakening, becoming of age, and evolution there will be an increase of one's magical ability. While they may seem similar, he believes the first two are forced growth, while evolution is an active growth. Tilly and Roland talked for a long time. Suddenly, out of curiosity, Tilly asked, if Roland were a witch, how powerful would his magic be after evolving? Roland nearly choked. While he was curious about experiencing this wondrous phenomenon firsthand, the price one might have to pay. It was better not to think about it. Tilly then inquired if she could bring a copy of the textbook he authored back to Slumbering Isle. Even though she seemed casual in asking, Roland noticed her right hand gently clenching the hem of her dress, indicating some nervousness. With a smile, he replied, of course. He hopes to assist the witches of Slumbering Isle in their evolution. Followed up by saying Tilly is his sister. Tilly didn't respond to the latter part of his statement, making the atmosphere in the office a tad awkward. She gave a slight nod, thanking him before taking her leave. Roland wondered if he had been too presumptuous, thinking that she might not be interested in such an approach. Yet, to his surprise, as Tilly reached the door, she paused, turning back to softly say, sometimes, I wish you weren't my brother.